I don't really care about the violin at all at this point. When did you first make your first electric cello?
Oh, I'm terrible with dates, but it must have been close to 20 years ago. Yeah.
So around 2000?
Exactly. Hmm?
Late 90s, 2000?
Around 2000, I'd say, yeah. Right around then. Here, I meant to bring this down. Give me 1 second. I'll go get something.
Sure.
All right, I found it. And what this is, looks a little familiar. It looks a little like your cello,
Yeah, it
doesn't
does.
it?
Yeah, it does.
And here, let me take it off the stand here. This is the very first mock-up really that I made. So this instrument, you can see again, it has a lot of similarity to the cello, some differences. This is the very first one I ever made, and it's a mock-up. It was never intended to be played. It's made out of a cheap wood, and this is just a piece of pine that I dyed black to see what it would kind of look like on the instrument. So I work everything out that way. I don't start by trying to make a perfect instrument. I work out all the details, and you can see that this has this plate on the back to hold the strings. I gave that up and changed that and so on. And I mean, these knobs here, there's no electronics in this thing or anything. It's just a way to develop the idea. And here, interesting, on the back of the neck, you see I have two different points of reference, bigger than those little pins that you have. But that was the origin of the thinking there. This is all just made out of the cheapest materials, but that's how I work out the ideas. So I can change it quickly. I haven't made a big investment in some beautiful piece of flame maple or something, and I guess I'll have to live with that. I did it that way.
That's great, though.
But no, this way I get it all worked out in advance, and that's how I work. It's really how I develop all these instruments, is by first mocking it up and with a great deal of flexibility and without a lot of investment in craft, but just focused on the design.
That's so cool. Did you make the cello before the violin, or the violin came before the cello?
I think that it was the bass, cello, violin.
Ah, so we came first.
Yes. I've always been that way.
You're my type of guy. That's super cool. That's not much different. So that was like your prototype. That's your mock-up.
Well, I don't call it a prototype because a prototype would be, in my terminology, I mean, you call it whatever you want, but I think of a prototype as a working model.
Yeah.
This is
proof of concept.
Just a paste up, an exploration of design opportunities and limitations, and then from a mock-up, I would make a prototype.
I want to ask you, our world as a classical cello world is notoriously conservative. Have you ever encountered pushback from luthiers, and can a local luthier work on your cello? And I'm going to add to this, do you consider yourself a luthier?
I don't know what the definition of a luthier is, but I have made many musical instruments, although the instrument you have in your hand there, I didn't make it. I designed it, but I didn't make it. Our instruments are factory made at a very specialized factory with great craftspeople working there and so on, but also with CNC milling machines and all the latest programming and technology that we can get. Musical instruments these days are better than ever. I mean, think how much more we've got going for us now. First of all, we know everything they did, because we have the historical record of that, so that's a resource.
Yeah.
If Antonio needed a drill bit, to drill a hole and, for the pegs or whatever, he'd have to go down to the local blacksmith and explain to him exactly what he wanted, and probably would be pretty crude, certainly by any comparison to what we have today. People may not like the idea that the top of their cello was carved on a computer-operated machine, but trust me, You can carve a hell of a top on a computerized machine. And yes, to make a fine acoustic instrument does involve tapping the top and a human element there, without a doubt. But the resources that a great luthier has today are just astronomical compared to what was available to the old masters, and they're making great instruments. And they're accepted too as such. And so it's a new world, and what's going on in the fabrication of fine acoustic instruments is really something special. And here's the thing. We all have our preconceived notions about what is good and what is not good, and if it's got a certain brand name on it, or a certain luthier from way back when, and that's who built it, then it's impossible for a human being to ignore the prejudice that you bring to a given situation. For example, musicians will say that they only care about the sound. Really, they don't care about anything else, just the sound. But it's not true, okay?
No, they're lying.
Even the top players, to a fair degree, they hear with their eyes. And if they see an instrument that appears beautiful to them, they're going to play it beautifully, and it's going to sound great. Yep. If they look at an instrument and they don't really like it, they think it's, whatever, not cool, it's going to sound terrible. It's just the way it is. It's an interesting phenomenon.